Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review, and continuing off of me and Sam's review of The Omen, I'm going to be taking a look at the sequels that spawned from it, starting today with Damien, Omen II. Now, I've always been fascinated by the Omen franchise. I was really into these movies when I was younger, and I think it's because I think the concept of this is really unique, and it's a really cool idea for a series of movies, basically following the son of the Antichrist being born in modern day and his slow rise to power with each movie. I think that's a really cool idea that, if well executed, could make for like a fascinating series. But the problem is, the sequels didn't quite execute it so well, because Omen II is okay. It's not the worst. I've seen many worse sequels, especially sequels to like classic great horror films. I've seen worse, but it's just kind of a dull like retread of the first movie that has some cool ideas and potential for some interesting stuff, but just doesn't quite reach that. So the plot of this movie picks up right after the first one, and we see the character of Bugenhagen, the man who gave Richard Thorne the daggers in the first movie, and he finds out that Damien is still alive, their plan completely failed, so now he wants to get the word out that, you know, Damien is the Antichrist, so he finds this friend of his who's a reporter, brings him to these ruins where there's this painting by this monk like many years ago that basically shows Damien, and basically, you know, reveals that he's the devil. But of course, you know, evil ensues, and they basically get crushed as the place crumbles down upon them. So fast forward to 7 years later, Damien is now 12, and he's living with his uncle and his family, and now he's going to military school, and the rest of the movie basically follows Damien as he slowly figures out who he really is and what his destiny is, while other people along the way figure that out too and get killed in the process. This movie has the same feel as the first one does. Still has that classy, big-budget Hollywood production feel to it that normally these type of movies wouldn't have. It doesn't feel like a cheaply made sequel, and that's really good, but the tone of the movie, it doesn't quite match that atmosphere that the first one had. The first one had that just really creepy, eerie atmosphere to it. This one doesn't have that, and in turn it comes off as kind of dull. Because also the pacing is kind of off in this movie. The first half is a little slow, like there's a lot of business talk and all that kind of stuff, and then once like the revelations start kicking in, the movie kind of like speeds ahead till the ending and then just ends. So in this movie you find out that the Thorne family is this big, rich, wealthy family that has their own business and even owns their own museum, which I thought was kind of weird because in the first film I just thought that Gregory Peck was, you know, wealthy because he was a politician. You know, that's why there's like press always at like his family parties and stuff, because he was an important political figure. But it turns out it's because he's part of this huge family, which I thought felt kind of tacked on. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't remember there being any real references to his family or anything in the last movie, but maybe there were. And there's a lot of like business talk, and especially in the first half, because there is this one character who's this kind of like up-and-coming guy in the business, and his ideas don't fly with the older people. You know, the people are like, oh no, he's too out there with his ideas, and Damien's uncle ends up taking to his ideas, being like, oh yeah, let's give him a shot. And it turns out that that guy is like one of, you know, the followers of the devil, and he's actually doing this so he can like groom, you know, Damien to slowly take over the business.
After all, it'll be yours one day.
And Mark's.
And Mark's, of course.
And so there's a lot of like that discussion. A lot of those scenes I thought were kind of just dull, and I don't know, I wasn't really interested in it. Like, I didn't really care about what they were trying to do. In fact, I can't really remember what it was even. And then we get to Damien, who I really like the actor who plays him. I thought he did a pretty good job, and he feels like a natural progression from the actor in the first film. So I really like him, and for the first half of the movie, he's just being a normal kid, you know, doing normal kid things, oblivious to, you know, what his fate is and who he really is. But there's some weird things that kind of happen. There's this moment where they're in the academy and there's one kid's like bullying him and making fun of his family, and, you know, just by staring at him, almost like telekinetically, he ends up making the kid like fly against the door and everything. He's like, oh no, what's happening? You feel like he's slowly starting to realize that something is up, that something's going on with him. And you have his instructor at the military school, who is played by Lance Henriksen, which can't go wrong with that, you know, I can't go wrong with Lance Henriksen, he's the greatest. And he is also, you know, a follower of the devil, and he knows about Damien. He's trying to like personally take care of him, personally help him out. you know? And he is the one that ends up basically revealing to him what he really is. And there's this really good moments of, you know, Damien reading the Bible, basically reading this passage that Lance Henriksen told him to read, and then he ends up like cutting the hair and he finds the 666, and then he kind of has this like freak out. He just runs and just like yells like, why me, and everything. And you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like, we're gonna have some sort of, we're gonna play into his like conflict of like, I'm just a kid but I'm destined to be the devil's son. Like, this is gonna be really fascinating. And then almost immediately he's like, oh yeah, I'm the devil. I'm bad now. And he's just like going around, you know, with that kind of like evil stare and causing people to die and smiling at it. And you're like, what? It happens really fast. Like, there's no real development to it. And I just would have liked a bit more development with that, or even like a little more conflict to make it a bit more interesting. It was just a very fast transition, and that's kind of like one of the few pacing problems that the movie has. Also, with this movie being a retread of the original, there's a lot of like similar elements. Like, the uncle is basically the Gregory Peck character, and you know, you got all these people telling him like, oh, there's something wrong with Damien, you know, there's something wrong with him, and he's just like, no, everything's fine, there's something wrong with him, he's just a kid. And then of course he ends up finding out, someone reveals it to him. So he spends the last act being like, oh, I have to kill Damien, he's the devil. Also, this does what a lot of typical sequels do in that it ups the body counts, you know, ups the gore and everything, and it doesn't really add much to the movie because, like, the deaths in this movie are so, like, obvious. They just, like, will introduce a character who knows that something's wrong with Damien, and then they'll just kill him in the next scene, because they know, oh, and like in this movie, the symbol of death now is not the dog, like in the first film, it's a crow. A little more on the nose, but you know, the crow's kind of cool. I don't mind that. It's kind of a neat little like image that pops up throughout the movie. But that's kind of what happens. Beginning of the movie, they have this aunt who like does not like Damien at all. She's like, hey, I saw, you know, like Richard Thorne go crazy because of him and try to friggin' murder him. I know that's what happened. So there's something wrong with Damien. I want him out of here. And the next scene she dies. Or there's this reporter that pops up who knows about like Bugenhagen and his like attempts to try to kill Damien and everything. And so she's trying to like interview the uncle, trying to let him know that like Damien's evil. And you know, of course the uncle's like, no, you're crazy. So the next scene, she gets killed. You know, or you had this doctor who, like, there's this part in the movie where there's this accident, this chemical accident at one of the Thorne factories where all the students from Damien's school are on a tour of. And they're all in the hospital. They all got mildly affected by it, but nothing severe. But Damien wasn't affected by it at all. And so the doctor's like, this is weird, I'm going to investigate further. And as he investigates, he finds out, you know, there's something wrong with Damien. So in the next scene, he dies. And it's just these random, like, these, like, little characters who get introduced just to die in the next scene that you have, like, no connection to or nowhere to care for. In the first film, not only were the death scenes kind of spread throughout the movie, but they happened to characters who you were interested in, that you were invested in, and you cared for, and you wanted to see, like, where they were going with this, and then when they died, you're like, oh, crap, there they go. Like, it had much more of an effect in the first film than the second one. The second one just kind of felt like, you know, it's a sequel. We have to up the ante. Let's have more deaths. And that's what they did. And the deaths are fine. Most of them are kind of okay. The one with the reporter and the crow is kind of like a cool, like, Birds homage, it kind of felt like. But the one that stands out, the one that is probably the best death thing in the movie, is the doctor who is in the elevator, and, like, the elevator, like, starts going, like, fast and everything, then it crashes at the bottom. And then all of a sudden this cord from the top of the elevator shaft just comes, like, speeding down, crashes through the elevator, and chops the dude in half. That's a good death scene. That one's very memorable. Like, that's a good sequence. There's a lot of good ideas, and I feel like if developed better, I feel this could have been a really compelling follow-up. If they didn't focus on, you know, introducing characters to kill them off in gruesome ways, and focused on really developing, like, Damien's story and everything, we could have gotten a really, like, solid follow-up that really does continue the story, and that's why I feel like how it is with most of this series, is that, like, there's that potential, but it just doesn't quite get it there. There's some stuff that I like about this. Jerry Goldsmith comes back to score the movie, and it's another fantastic score. It's another great awesome epic score, just in line with the first one, like just as good as the first score. So that's fantastic. I thought all the acting was pretty solid. Like I mentioned, I like the actor who plays Damien. I thought he does good in like both scenes where he's doing either playing just a kid or when he's actually being evil. I think he does a good job of that. I like him. I even like the uncle and everything, even though like I said the characters are kind of like retreads of the last movie. I think all the acting is pretty solid all the way through. Like I said, I like that it still has that kind of classy like feel to it, where it doesn't feel like your very typical horror movie. It still has that kind of bigger, grander feel to it. I really like that. I like how you see the seeds being planted for Damien's like eventual rise to power. Like in this one, he finds out who he is and what his destiny is and fully accepts it. Also, you have the one guy who works at Thorn Industries who's slowly gaining more and more power, who's also a disciple of Damien. And it's really cool how there's already like disciples of Damien like all around him, including, you know, like I said, the guy at the business, like the Lance Henriksen and stuff like that. That's a really interesting idea that they didn't really play with too much in the first one. They just had the one nanny character, but aside from her, like everyone else was normal. And this one you see that there's more people out there, and that there's probably even more out there that are gonna help him rise to power, and I think that's a really cool and unique idea. And, you know, just from being from Chicago, I like that this movie takes place in Chicago. And I also like that the Thorn Museum is actually just the Field Museum. I just found that to be really cool because I always go to the Field Museum. So there's a scene of them walking down the hallway and I'm watching and I'm like, wait a second, that's the Field Museum. So that's just kind of a thing I thought was neat. I like that. So yeah, it's not an awful movie. I think it's an okay film that's like a decent watch. It's just, you know, pacing is kind of off. And some stuff doesn't quite come together too well as it could have. But it's not the worst. Like I said, I've seen worse horror sequels out there. It's just very middle of the road. Very okay, a decent rehash of a great film. That doesn't reach the heights of that film, you know. It's just okay. So that's Damien, Omen II. And I'll be back to continue the series. But until then, I'll talk to you guys later.